Assalamu alaikum and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I hope you're safe, healthy, and productive. Using your mask when you're out, maintaining physical distance. And today we will be talking in a whole lot of things, but you're watching first Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, who reaches 57 million rural subscribers in America, Canada, and Mexico. We are also streaming on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and you can download our app, Muslim Network TV, on your phones. Our website is muslimnetwork.tv. Recently, I encountered one of those things which people keep forwarding each other without reading most of the time is vaccine halal. I said, oh boy, this question continued to come back. And in somewhat contributes to all those conspiracy theories which are popping up. So halal is the Muslim term for what is permissible for Muslim. It is mostly used in reference to food, but it applies to other things which are not consumable items, but also deals with behavior and action of Muslims. The term is now used for halal travel and halal investment, halal financing. So usage is increasing in multiple directions. And market itself is growing. There is the research and market group. I don't know how. There seems to be heavy on the internet, several thousand reports, not Muslim operation. But they have estimated recently that halal food market in 2020 is 1.7 trillion US dollars. Today we have two experts, one from Canada, one from USA, to discuss with them whole thing about halal. I'm not going to ask them any fatwas about vaccine. If vaccine is halal or haram. Saving lives is top priority because God even has told us when the matter of life and death, you can consume anything which is haram. That settles the whole thing. So with me is Shahed Amanullah. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Shahed Amanullah is a major leader in Muslim communities, founder of Zabiha, the world's first halal restaurant guide. He's also managing director of Frost Capital, a private equity fund manager. We also have Sheikh Omar Subedar. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh Omar Subedar is the Chief Operations Officer at the Halal Monitoring Authority and the Director of Muthbah Institute. Am I saying it right?
Mathaba Institute.
Mathaba. Sorry, I could not do tajweed in English Romans. Mathaba Institute. Well, welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
So, Shahed, when you started Alt Muslim, it has, at its peak, it has 2.5 million annual unique users, but Zabiha.com has 10 million. Are you saying Muslims are more concerned about what they're eating than what is going in their heads?
Well, I think you have to look at halal in a much bigger context than whether food is permissible for Muslims. For many Muslims in North America, and really anywhere where Muslims are a minority, halal food has become an expression of identity. And particularly after 9/11, when a lot of Muslims responded to those events by reclaiming their identity and redefining who it was that they were, food is a great expression of identity. It's also a great medium through which you share what's special about you to other people. And because you already had so many Muslims that were involved in food service in the restaurant space, especially a lot of immigrants who started up restaurants, the migration to a halal restaurant scene was just a natural thing. I mean, when I started Zabiha in 1998, I could find no more than 200 restaurants in North America that openly identified as serving halal food. But that number has now grown to well over 10,000 and rising. I think in North America, it's probably close to 12,000 restaurants that openly state that they sell halal, one or more halal dishes. And the reasons behind that are really multiple fold, but the biggest driver is that Muslims are reclaiming their identity. They're trying to make sure that their Muslim identity fits with their broader American or Canadian identities, and that they are and that's that middle ground that they feel comfortable with. And it's just also a great way to kind of show the world, here's who we are, here's what we're contributing to the landscape, to the culinary landscape. It's something that's beneficial to you. When you walk the streets of New York and you ask any New Yorker about halal food, every single one of them will know what you're talking about. Now, it's a particular type of halal food, but it's part of the landscape. And it's something that I think we can not just be proud about, but we also have to, and I'm sure Sheikh Omar will talk about this, we also have to remember why halal in the first place. Like, there's a purpose for it. It's not just about identity. We are a community of values, and halal food is also an expression of our values. And so we have to remember that.
So, Sheikh Omar Subedar, this Halal Monitoring Authority, with authority comes a lot of weight. So, who appointed this authority?
Well, honestly speaking, it is self-appointed, but the thing is that this organization is actually a department of the Canadian Council of Muslim Theologians, which was formed back in 2002. So you have a membership of over 150 scholars from the East Coast to the West Coast. And since the vast majority of them are serving as imams in their local masjids, they're already looked upon for guidance, and they're asked typically, is this halal, is that halal? So it was just a natural evolution that a department was made based on certain circumstances. And here we go, we've got the Halal Monitoring Authority.
So it is more like a fatwa type positioning, but do you serve as a watchdog who is certifying, who is not certifying properly, or a watchdog on behalf of the consumers, or it's limited to people asking a question and you respond to them?
No, it's a certification agency with a monitoring component to it. So our point of difference is that when it comes to the meat industry, we're going to have people stationed at each part of the thing, the transition of the meat until it gets to the customer. So from the abattoir to the processing facility to the distributor to even the retailers and the restaurant outlets, we have individuals that are situated there, making sure that everything is in compliance to our guidelines. So that's the main focus of our service, along with giving seminars on halal and articles, as you can see on our website, and fatwas on things that are of pressing issues with the halal industry.
Shahed is, how many halal certifying agencies are there in the United States? Any idea?
It's countless. I mean, I've been tracking this for quite a while, and I'm sure Sheikh Omar will agree that it's a very fragmented market in terms of halal authorities. A lot of them are local, so sometimes you'll have groups of Muslims or institutions in a locality, in a city, that will take kind of that role. Other times you have national authorities. And then you also have authorities that don't deal with kind of the restaurant level, they deal with the producer level. So like one authority in the States, the Islamic Society of the Washington area, Washington State, they do a lot of authorizations of major beef producers in the country. So they don't go to the restaurant level, they go to like the mainstream meat level. They also do like a Creekstone steaks as well. So it's a very fragmented system, and every one of them has a different way of approaching halal. There hasn't been a kind of meeting of the minds in terms of like some kind of standardization. It's something actually I would love to hear Sheikh Omar's thoughts about, because it does make things a little difficult, a little competitive. People always ask, which one should I go to, and it's hard for me even to recommend sometimes. It's like, well, it depends on where you are and what you're trying to do, because there's an authority for every aspect of the halal food chain.
So, Sheikh Omar, this is extraordinary that you have monitors placed at different levels, probably farm to the marketplace. So how many monitors do you have?
At current, we have over 30 employees that are in the field monitoring. And that's throughout the country, because we have different operations in different provinces.
30 people monitoring. That's substantial. Shahed, do we know in USA anybody who has 30 people monitoring the process of halal?
I don't think we have. You have to understand, Canada is a kind of a much more advanced producer of halal food and services than America is. Actually, I believe that Canada is kind of ahead of the US in many ways. Also because in the US, it's much more fragmented.
You know those people who wanted to run to Canada once Trump wins.
Well, Canadians are fantastic and nice and wonderful, but I'm quite happy being here. But here's the thing: is that because of the fragmented nature of the halal market, you do have a lot of smaller ones that are deploying in certain areas. I don't know the numbers of employees at some of these places like Halal Advocates, which is based in the Bay Area. They have a significant size. Islamic Society Washington area has a significant one. ISNA as well. But they all still kind of operate as kind of smaller entities. The biggest problem I see is that the demand for halal has grown considerably, and that means that when you start producing halal in much bigger quantities, you're talking about going from small family farms to large producers. It requires a different level of service. It requires a different level of monitoring, and I fear that we aren't keeping up with that. To be able to give the same level of authority and quality at that scale, right? And I don't want halal to be cheapened to the point where, we're just playing a tape cassette in the slaughter room and saying that that's halal. We can't cheapen it, because the minute that we turn halal into a joke, it's just not going to last anymore. People are going to give up faith in it, and they're going to say, well, why do I do that? I might as well just do organic. They're much more vigilant about monitoring. And that's very much in the spirit of halal. So I'll just do that. I've had Muslims argue that to me. So I want to make sure we keep up with those international standards and with that international level of service. And I'm confident we have the talent and the resources to rise up to that standard.
Well, you mentioned international standards. Who's determining international standards of halal?
I've been to a couple of halal conferences where they've had these discussions, and unfortunately, as the greater Muslim world, there's a lot of infighting, and this is no exception. Everybody agrees there should be a standard, but everybody agrees that their own standard should be the one that everyone agrees to. And then we have that fighting, but Sheikh Omar will probably have a lot more to say on this issue.
So how come anytime difficult question comes, you refer to Sheikh Omar here?
Because I'm not an expert in halal. This person is, and I defer to him.
I think it is your appreciation of everything Canadian.
Honestly, dude, I think the Canadians have done a lot of amazing work in the halal space. Toronto is by far the most. Toronto is the biggest halal market when it comes to the restaurant scene on my site, on Zabiha, by far.
There is no question about that. Whenever I go in Canada, and those restaurants, just their architecture and the whole presentation before you get to the food is wow, because I don't see that anywhere in the US. The type of thing, definitely not in Chicago. So, Sheikh Omar, is there a less fight and more standards which are established in Canadian Muslim community when it comes to halal?
Well, the good news is that, alhamdulillah, there are a number of major organizations that have come together back in 2014 that were playing a major role in the halal landscape. And alhamdulillah, we did strike a national standard that we all signed off on. So that's already in place. It just so happens that when it comes to the mechanics, how are you going to apply it and monitoring and so forth, that just fell off the rails. It was revived 1.5 years ago, which I was also part of. And alhamdulillah, the standards were just modified a bit because there's new things that are coming into the industry all the time. Remember, we're living in industry 4.0. We have to adjust accordingly. The standards of halal are going to be living. They're not going to be stagnant. So we have to counter the new trends that are coming in the industry. We have to address them, and we've got to come to some form of an agreement as to how we're going to deal with them. So in terms of a standard, yes, there already is one on paper, and major organizations have already signed off on it. Now we're pretty much at the same place where we were a few years ago as to how we're going to implement this, how are we going to oversee the compliance of all the organizations to these standards. That's the part that we're right now working out.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and with me are Sheikh Omar Subedar and Shahed Amanullah. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and with me is Shahed Amanullah and Omar Subedar. Is there any law in USA or Canada? I mean, I heard that there was a law in New Jersey, then there was a law in state of Illinois. That was a long time ago about halal enforcement, and if somebody messing up with halal, there could be some action against them. I hear there are kosher laws all around the country. So who controls halal? I mean, anybody can write halal. Is it illegal to write halal on a product?
That is a very good question. I mean, we've had, as you mentioned, at least 10 states that I know of that have legislation that actually prescribes penalties for saying that something is halal, something if it's not. The problem is that because there's no legally agreed upon definition of halal. I mean, from like secular law, then it's hard to enforce because someone who says it's halal could very well say, well, I say it's halal because I said Bismillah over it, and that's what I believe. And then, then what does a courtroom do, right? And that's why we need to, this has to be done in conjunction with halal authorities that have come to a common understanding and then have communicated that to these law enforcement agencies so that they understand what that means. And so I think what's happened is that those laws were passed and they were basically toothless. And so no one's ever even tried to prosecute or hold someone to account for that.
The reason that thing is very important, and I will ask Sheikh Omar to respond as well. There was a time when the Soundvision website used to have quite a bit of articles. Those are still there about halal and haram. And people were using our articles in lawsuits and things like that. There was a very famous lawsuit filed by vegetarians on McDonald's, but somebody used our material to file on behalf of Muslim. And, Muslim actually, when lawsuit was settled, Muslims receive, I think, $4 million, different consumer agencies and things like that. And it was essentially based on the material which we have. So before one of the article, we have a team visiting a Muslim area where a Muslim market and Muslim butchers are. And they went into the alleys and what boxes are they dumping? And they came to realize that half of those boxes came from companies who don't even touch halal, don't even claim halal, does not state any halal. And then we saw different shopkeepers will put down others that he is doing this, he is doing that, and it is not quite halal. So it is a confusion in that area. And people, as a consumer, they feel the responsibility is over. If somebody is saying it's halal, they go ahead and use that. So if there is no law to control that, and there is no big brand name which is established, how do we overcome this particular challenge that halal, when a person sees halal, it is halal? Like in kosher, I have heard that anybody can put K on a product and nobody can stop that. I don't know how true it is, but I heard that. But there are other type of symbols like U in a circle or K with a triangle, which I heard cannot be used without that. But those are established one. And Muslims, some Jewish person was telling me, it seems that Muslims are more consumer of kosher products now than Jewish people themselves. I don't know how true is that, but what are the things, Sheikh Omar, your organization with mashallah 30 employees to monitor the halal process are thinking of doing to establish that standard which everyone agreed to, that if somebody violates, there are repercussions to it?
Well, Hamza, here in the Canadian landscape, there's a lot more control in the sense that, first and foremost, 10 years ago, you had the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that approached the Muslim community on a national level to consult with them and basically come up with some solutions as to how we deal with all this fraud that is going on within the halal industry. And you pointed out some of those practices, and there's a lot more than what you've just mentioned. So what they then settled on, I don't want to go through the entire story, but what they settled on was in 2016, they introduced a regulation where anyone that is going to claim being halal, they have to be backed by a certifier. Now, the certifier is not going to be regulated by the government, but what they have now done is that they've given a reference point to the consumer, that if the consumer has any questions, they can now go to a certifier and have their questions addressed. So it's right now, no one can go, at least on paper, no one can go and just put up a halal sign, whether in English or Arabic, unless they have someone backing them, some form of authority. So this is one of the things that the Canadian government has done to try and help the Muslims in their pursuit of consuming undubious halal. Now, when it comes to our organization, these practices were something we were introduced to back in 2004. My personal approach back in those days, my father came here back in '68. So in those times, you didn't have anything halal in terms of restaurants and butcher shops and so forth. So I remember back in those days, like the type of efforts you had to make to try and get custom halal. So what I had in my mind after I came back, graduating from England back in 2001, I still had that picture in my mind that the way halal works is that you go to your butcher shop, and the guy that's behind the counter is the guy that actually slaughtered the stuff, and he's serving it to you. That's the way I thought it works. I had complete zero knowledge as to how the industry really works. Now, we had people from the industry after our organization, the Canadian Council of Muslim Theologians, was made. They came in and they start giving us like a behind the scenes glimpse as to some of the practices that go on, which led us to form a task force to do a thorough investigation as to how the industry works and what are the malpractices. And it was far more than what was identified in that meeting that we had. Anywhere from the false labeling, getting things that are absolutely not halal at all. There's zero halal going on. It's not even a matter of interpretation. There's just no halal, and slapping on a sticker, or getting stuff from foreign countries, doing the same thing, mixing and matching. Like there's so many different malpractices. So this is what led to our organization then being formed in 2006, where we said that the only way we can fix this is that when you have to have a person on the ground. You've got to have a person at the facility that is watching everything from beginning to end. And then there's going to be a tracking system from stamping to labeling and so forth. So when it goes from one phase to the other phase, so for example, the added part, you're going to have an individual that's monitoring the slaughter of the chicken, the slaughter of the cows and the goats and the sheep and so forth. And then there's going to be a stamping system, a tracking system that's going to take you to the processing facility, where again, there's a lot of mixing that goes on. So you have to have an individual that's watching that what comes out of that box is the very thing that's going into that box. Nothing else is being mixed with it. And then taking that to the store level or the restaurant level and having monitors make sure that, hey, when things are short, you're not going to the next door Loblaws or any other store and trying to make up for the shortfall very quickly, because who's going to see you? Who's going to watch you? So we've basically had this program implemented since 2006, and alhamdulillah, it's working for us. I'm not going to say that we were perfect from the get-go, but we learned a lot, kept on fine-tuning it, and alhamdulillah, we are very confident with our system that now we were audited by the World Halal Council, which we are a member of. We were also audited by the Malaysian authorities, JAKIM, and alhamdulillah, they were really happy with the processes, to the extent that JAKIM even said that we have some tips that we need to learn from you. So alhamdulillah, this is from the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we'd be able to manage this part of the industry. But again, that's our services are not confined to that. We're also in other areas of the industry as well.
Shahed, your system of the Zabiha.com is that, people, it's crowdsource.
Right.
I go to a restaurant, I write, okay, it's halal and it's Zabiha and things like that, or partial. Are you thinking of developing some system in which you are able to double verify? Because, I happen to be, my office for a while was next to a Muslim restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And that restaurant will be sold almost every year or two. It is still thriving, but it will continuously change hands. And as they change hands, their policy will change. So since they knew that I am very particular about what I eat, as soon as I enter, they will tell me which item is there for me to eat in that particular day. It's not that there will be certain thing will always be halal or the whole thing is halal. So of course, with crowdsourcing, you cannot do that. So what else? What is the additional thing which you could do when people have who are as particular as myself will have a better way of figuring it out?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because in many ways, the work of the authority and Zabiha are complementary, because you're handling things from the supply side and I'm engaging with the demand side. And so there used to be a time And I remember this because, I grew up having to like drive 20 miles to the only halal butcher in town. I mean, I remember those days. I remember when there was really nowhere to eat that was halal.
You guys should have contacted me. All I will do is, instead of driving, I will just eat some veggies which are available.
Exactly. But the thing is that there was a time where customers just trusted. If somebody said it was halal, they wouldn't ask. And that comes from our value system, right? I mean, our value system is that if a Muslim tells us that, then we believe them. That we're trained to do that, right? But what I've done with Zabiha is create a customer base that always asks questions, and created a venue for them to put out information that they find. They're the eyes and ears, so that other people can benefit. So what I encourage the people on Zabiha to do is to not just take things for granted, to constantly ask questions, to report back what they see back to other users of the site, so that we can change or monitor or do our own inquiry if we so choose. And so by creating an informed and active user base that doesn't take things for granted, what they do is they keep these restaurants on their toes. And in many cases, what they do is that they actually encourage the restaurants to start going to the authorities so that people stop, asking for proof, so that they're now going to, they're pushed in that direction. And this is simply meeting market demand. So what I want to do is I want to cultivate a market that is aware of what it's doing. And you've seen the same thing happen for the green movement. You've seen the same thing happen for the organic movement. It's the informed consumer that drives the business to be better. And so if I can do that on my end, and you on the other end can fulfill that demand through the supply side, collectively, I think we will make this a very robust space that people have faith in and trust, which I don't think they had even 10 years ago.
Well, thank you so much. We're talking with Shahed Amanullah and Sheikh Omar Subedar, one on developing more on consumer side, one on certification and monitoring side. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and when we come back after the short break, we'll talk about halal and tayyib. We'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamualaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No.
And here's Adam and here's Anissa.
Adam and his sister.
Adam is a boy and he is very smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. So the God's Allah's requirement about something to be halal and tayyib, I don't think people used to pay as much attention to tayyib part of that command as they do now. So how the consideration of tayyib has resulted in the improvement of halal certification or discussion about halal? Anyone of you have any thoughts on that?
Well, when it comes to the term tayyib, it's a very relative term. There's no uniform definition for the word tayyib. It just literally means good. Now, how it's going to be applied, that's going to vary from cultural mindset to cultural mindset. Some people would like to classify organic as tayyib. There's different approaches, but when we go to the classical texts, again, we're not going to see any uniform definition of tayyib. So in terms of our practice is a matter of applying the best practices in the industry, making sure that we're not substandard, we're trying to be above the standard. So down here with all the different health regulations that you have from the national level, from the CFIA, and on the provincial level here in Ontario, such as Omar, there's so many things that are going on to ensure that the food is safe, the animals are well treated. There's a whole inspection process prior to them going to the abattoir. So alhamdulillah, that area, it's pretty much handled on a communal basis, both the halal industry and the government working hand in hand.
Shahed, the consciousness about what is going on, our food chain has substantially improved. When classic scholars were writing about it, at that time, most of them were eating very clean food. I mean, it was non-industrialized, agrarian-based, very considerate type of material as compared to what is happening now. So are you, Shahed, aware of any group which is also particular about saying, okay, this is not just halal, it's a organic halal or something of like that? Have you seen any literature or conversation on these areas?
So I haven't seen literature on it, but I have seen a great deal of consumer movement in that area. And, I think, I'm old enough to remember going into halal meat places and you see these chunks of meat hanging from the ceiling. Maybe there's some flies around. This cleanliness is kind of questionable, but technically it was halal. And what I've seen, I've done a lot of surveys of our user base over the last 20 years, and there was, Muslims are susceptible to mainstream trends like anyone else. And as the mainstream moved toward organic, as the mainstream moved toward kind of going against cruelty to animals, Muslim consumers have moved in that direction as well. And so when I try to describe halal to someone who's not familiar to it, I usually try to tell them, it's like organic plus. And let me tell you about the plus part. The plus part involves, for example, how you treat the animal before you slaughter it. Just the acts of kindness that you do to that animal, not letting them be in the room when other animals are being slaughtered, giving it some water, calming it down. These are things that you don't find even in the most, organic of organic meats in the mainstream. And so, this is something I try to stress all the time. We're not just trying to serve Muslims due to some technical requirement. We're trying to elevate a standard for everyone, and that there is value in going to halal, even if you're not Muslim, even if you're an atheist. If you care about the welfare of animals, you should consider halal. Because, I'm sure there's a lot of organic meat producers that are kind to their animals, but we've codified it as part of our tradition. And so I want that to be part of the conversation. And to be fair, halal consumers are the ones that are pushing this. They're the ones that are demanding of the restaurants, it's not good enough that it's halal, it has to be organic and halal. They're the ones that are asking, which farms did you get this from? They're the ones that are trying to remind people that just because you killed it in a certain way, you also had to have raised it in a certain way. And an aware consumer base is what's going to drive this. And so I think there's a lot for Muslims to be proud of. And again, this is part of our contribution to greater society. We're doing this for the benefit of humanity.
Well, when you talk about humanity, there are some human beings who are using halal consumption as a part of their Islamophobic agenda. And it comes as a spike and then it goes away. So I have heard that of course, the Uyghur Muslims nowadays cannot consume halal. And there was one time in China used to be a major exporter of halal. I have, when I visited China, I will walk about 10 to 15 miles every day with backpack and all the time, even non-Muslim areas, I will find restaurants and food places and eat halal. If nothing else, there will be something halal being sold in a can or something. Now they have changed, and European, different places in Europe. So what is this whole movement? Here in US and Canada, probably it is not as successful, because I remember in Whole Foods was serving some halal Zabiha products, and there was a campaign and they dismissed it.
Right.
But in Europe and other places, there seems to be value. In India, people are literally lynched on the street because they were transporting some animals and they thought they're going to slaughter them and things like that. So anyone of you have any thoughts on it? What are the actual facts about it in Europe? Is it true in many countries Muslim cannot slaughter an animal?
Yeah, and you just had a ruling last week from the European Court that actually allowed different countries within the European Union to pass laws banning both kosher and halal slaughter. And make no mistake about it, these are anti-Muslim laws, and Jews are collateral damage to that. But the thing is, halal food is where Muslims meet their neighbors. That's the intersection. And so that's why halal food becomes politicized, because it is the point where people who are not Muslim meet kind of their Muslim neighbors. And halal food is if they can't strike out against Muslims and close their mosques or close their schools or do anything else, the one thing that they can try to do is get in the way of halal food. But they, whether it's here in North America or in Europe, it's a losing battle, and I'll tell you why. You can't fight what your stomach wants. There's a reason that doner kebabs are the most popular street food in Germany. There's a reason why, Desi Indian food is the most popular in the UK. There's a reason why, halal food is the street food of New York. And the more you try to curtail this, the more people are going to be curious about it. The interest in halal food skyrocketed after 9/11. It's the place where people can experience who Muslims are. And at the end of the day, your stomach is going to outweigh your bigotry. And this is the same case with Mexican food and Chinese food, and you can hate these people all you want, but you can't fight what your stomach likes. And so we need to lean into that and show that this is, there's no better sign of trust than being able to feed somebody, and nourish them, and have them eat that and benefit from it. And this is a great way to kind of break that prejudice.
So Shahed, since you're such a big fan of Canada, why not you import some of these Canadian standards and monitoring systems in the US?
Well, part of it has to do with our size, and part of it has to do with also just our spread. The American Muslim population is one of the most economically and ethnically diverse Muslim populations in the Western world. And in order to truly cater to this market, you have to address them where they are. Now, the interesting part about this, and this is true in all North America, is that as you have Muslim populations that are being born and raised here, they're not necessarily going to back home food. Their food is pizza and hamburgers and and chicken wings, and it's the food of the environment in which they grew up in, with the addition of being halal, and sometimes with the addition of being fusion with the foods of their home, and creating something new out of all of that. That's again where you got the halal guys on the streets of New York. And the great thing about this is that, you know, you mentioned Whole Foods earlier. So the food line that was put in there was Saffron Road of American Halal. I was a founding board member of that company. And what was really interesting about that is that, you know, only 5% or some small percentage of Saffron Road sales are to Muslims. The vast majority of it is to non-Muslims. And so, you know, when you do that, you buy social capital that allows a company like Whole Foods to say, we're not going to pay attention to the bigots. We're gonna keep this because our customers are buying this and they're not Muslim.
So 95% of their consumers were non-Muslims who were buying that product.
Yeah, because it's good and it happens to be halal. That's what it is. And if you turn over the box of Saffron Road, read the definition of halal that it puts there. It doesn't put it in the terms that a Muslim would put it. It says halal is a 1400-year-old ethical tradition that teaches sanctity of life. It teaches kindness to animals. I mean, it does it in very universal terms. So why would you not engage in it?
Well, the halal food probably is the only example in the United States in which halal food probably has gone mainstream. In Canada, no matter which grocery store you go, they have halal items available there. This may be more, as Shahed was saying, that it is because the population is, 10% of Mississauga and 5% of all, or 8% of all GTA is Muslim. So it's the size probably driving the economy there. But back to my question, US has, you mentioned there are a whole lot of people who certify. There's nobody who is monitoring the certifying agencies. And probably there are no gatherings as you have seen in other places taking place. And that's where I'm saying that whatever Canadians have done, probably, advantage there is 80% of Canadian Muslims are from Pakistan and India. And they have most of them have come in the 80s and onward, very few were earlier, based on their census. So there is a homogeneity and, understanding of the fiqh as compared to here, which is far more diverse. But do you see still there is a need for people who are certifying to come together maybe as a council and figure out a self correction system? I mean, you have such a huge user base of consumers. What about a conference of the consumer on these issues?
So on the authority side, there have been efforts to bring people together. And to be fair, Halal Advocates out in California is trying to up the level of quality for all certifiers, and they're being quite vigilant about that. In terms of getting consumers together, it's happening organically. There's probably, Sheikh Omar, correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably about 5 or 6 major metropolitan areas in North America that have halal festivals, right? That are weekend affairs where food trucks come out and restaurants come out, and it's a celebration of halal food. I know there's one in New York, New Jersey. I know there's one in California. There's one in Toronto, I know. And these are the places where you cultivate that consumer interest and that consumer demand, and you start to formalize it a little bit more, where the people who are coming together for this, that's the group of people. Those are the influencers. Those are the ones that you have to kind of activate so that they're the police that kind of check these authorities. And you had a controversy a few years back when Creekstone was revealed to be selling high premium halal steaks all across North America, and there were some questions about the authorities that they were using, and there was a vibrant online discussion that included the authorities themselves explaining exactly what they did to make that certification happen. And it was a very healthy conversation because I learned a lot about that whole process. How do you take a major producer and make sure that they're adhering to the law? So for example, they were showing ads where Creekstone was hiring Muslim slaughtermen to slaughter. I didn't realize that was part of the chain, and I'm glad that the authority was able to do that. So we need to cultivate this conversation in lieu of a conference. and a broad agreement. We just at least have to cultivate the conversation and the ability for consumers to own this and to feel like they have a right to ask these questions, and for the authorities to engage with those customers and be open.
Let's talk about what countries are leading in the area of halal. I mean, we have focused mostly. I mean, I thought initially that we will broaden the conversation to beyond food. But while we're staying on food for this conversation, which countries are more particular, have better systems in place?
Better systems in what regard?
In certifying, keeping an eye on certifications, saying this is halal or this is not halal. I heard, for example, that all meat which is exported from New Zealand is halal. I don't know whether it's true or not. I heard that Malaysian government has regularly halal authorities figuring it out. So any ideas where the government structures are involved in the industry?
So South Africa, the UK, Australia, New Zealand have pretty strong, Singapore have very strong halal advocacy and authority structures, but they also have issues. Like there's in the UK in particular, there's a lot of competition between the major entities, and and it's a public fight, and it's not, it hurts me to see a public fight between authorities when they 99% agree on what the standard is. And then you have some issues in South Africa as well. But those are still the ones where it's much more, it's very advanced.
But is it true that all meat which is exported by New Zealand, for example, is halal?
It's generally true.
Well, in New Zealand, yeah, they have federal regulations on this. And it's just become a bit more diverse as of late, but before it was confined to one set of standards that was governed by a particular organization, FIANS, but now there's more players involved, and now, you're getting, at least from this side, we're getting mixed messages now. It wasn't the same like a few years ago when it was a bit more uniform, and now these mixed messages are somewhat getting us concerned.
Yeah, and when you talk about export, the government usually steps in when it comes to export in ways that they don't step in when it's domestic, just because it becomes an international issue and they get involved. So you tend to be a little bit more kind of, you tend to believe the export quality of it rather than the domestic quality, just because of that emphasis.
All right. So the last question I have for you, what other organizations other than your organizations who you admire in the field of halal from any aspect in the United States and Canada?
Is that for me or Brother Shahed?
Both of
us,
Go ahead, Chick. Go ahead.
Well, I do admire the halal advocates. We are official partners with them. We're working very closely with them. And down here, you have organizations that are really stepping up and trying to work together. So, we have the ISNAs, we have the Canadian Council of Imams, and so forth. So the thing is that the willingness to come together and serve the greater community rather than just serving our personal organizational agendas, that is something that is admirable. And hopefully, inshallah, that's going to lead to greater good in the community, and put it like this, an easier experience for the industry and a wholesome experience for the consumer, inshallah.
Right. I'm a big fan here in the States. I'm a big fan of what American Halal has done with Saffron Road in terms of modeling best practices for mainstreaming halal without diminishing its quality. And I'm also a huge fan of the halal festivals that are happening in terms of just generating awareness and generating ownership by consumers over what is halal.
Well, thank you both, Sheikh Omar Subedar and Shahed Amanullah, for your time. Truly appreciate a good conversation. And thank you, Sher Dil Khan and Dr. Abdul Wahid, for producing today's show. And thank you for watching. Stay tuned for other programming. Muslim Network TV is 24/7, and we are always on Galaxy 19 satellite broadcasting there, and streaming on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and you can download our app on muslimnetwork.tv for iPhone or Android. Our website is muslimnetwork.tv. Peace. Salam.
Assalamu alaikum.